sounds great in theory. I actually think it'd be a terrible idea. I'll explain that in a bit. But we'll start with you, Greg Jennings. Greg, do you trust Cincinnati to get this right?
Obviously, considering their history, it's like, no. Just thinking about the history of Cincinnati and what they've not done in past times, I would say, no, I don't. The fact that this is even being discussed and it's kind of on the board and they're discussing it, I feel like they are looking at it as we have a unique set of guys that are offensively together that we would love to keep together. And obviously Hendrickson, what he's been able to do on the defensive side, it's getting pressure on the quarterback. They're looking at it as potentially the AFC is up for grabs. And if we start to try to tweak what we have, no Higgins, how does this offense look moving forward with just one guy in Chase, and obviously you got one of the better quarterbacks in all of football, Joe Burrow, and defense, and then pour into your defense. I actually think that they want to do it.
That they want to re-up everybody.
And this is why. It's because of the quarterback, Joe Burrow. When he first signed this deal, it was kind of like we had heard all the things about, man, we want to stay together, and then he takes all the money, and it's like, well, how are you going to stay together? But down at the Super Bowl, the other show that I'm on, Breakfast Ball, they were able to interview Joe Burrow and kind of ask him, would you be open to this? And this is what Joe Burrow said. Take a listen.
We have the cap space to get it done.
Right.
And I know, I want to make it happen. Everybody involved, Trey, T, Jamar, Mike G, we all want to stay together. And so when you have guys that are motivated like that, I think, you can get those things done.
So they said, hey, we need you to restructure. It's something you would consider. Not knowing what the numbers are, you'd be willing to at least have that type of conversation to keep the core guys together?
Of course.
Go ahead.
And that's the key. If Joe Burrow wants to get it done, then I feel like you have to give it a shot. If you're the Bengals, if you're looking to do what's right with your team and have a chance to compete at a high level, Pittsburgh obviously had a year that no one thought that they would have, and you didn't have the year that you wanted, but you got to try by starting to keep these guys together.
All right, just let me, before you go, Brew, I just want to explain one kind of just cap thing for the audience. Players almost always are willing to restructure what he's talking about, which is it is not taking a pay cut. It is, right, if you are due, I'll just use a round number, $35 million in salary this year, that means $35 million is going to hit the salary cap this year. If they turn that $35 million into a signing bonus, instead of getting it every week, you get it all at once, and then they can spread it out over 4 years, 5 years, whatever. So players, like what Joe Burrow is saying there is, yes, of course, I'm willing to take the money you owe me now rather than over the course of the year. It's not taking less money. It is making it more palatable for now and then kind of kicking that bill down the road a bit.
And this is probably where you're going, Nick. I don't think this is necessarily the right way they should be spending their money. You got to pay Jamar Chase, absolutely. I think I would sign Trey Hendrickson, absolutely. I would probably sign T. Higgins to a franchise tag and then trade him to get some defensive players. Now, I know they got a new defensive coordinator. Unless they think, I think it's Al Golden, he's going to pull a Vic Fangio and take one of the worst defenses in the league and make it the best. Unless you think that's happening, I think they need to get more players on defense. And even Philly added, they drafted well. They added Zach Vaughn and all that stuff. So I also think they need a running back. Like if they can get a top of the line or at least close to top of the line running back, I think they'd be better served. You got Jamar Chase. Other guys showed this year they could be a number 2, number 3 type receiver.
Yoshivas as a player.
Yeah, I mean,
Yoshivas is cool, but
I love T. I'm just saying Joe Burrow's supposed to be that type of guy that one great receiver should be enough, and then others that are good, solid guys.
Yeah, I really wish they'd asked him not will you restructure your contract, but will you take less money so that we can pay these guys, and see if the answer comes out the same. Because, as you look at some quarterbacks through time, they have taken less money because they understood that their success was tied into the success of the entire group, and it's not an infinite amount of money that's available. Like the more dollars you take, the less there is to spend on others. And to be able to keep 3 guys at the price points that they're going to be at, I don't think is realistic, and I don't necessarily feel that it's the best way they should spend their money. I like the idea of keeping Hendrickson because he had, what, he had 17 sacks last year,
years,
and as a team they had 35. So you're looking at half the production. Now they weren't very good in terms of pressuring the quarterback, but he was a big reason when they did pressure the quarterback that they were able to. So that should be a priority. And then when you're looking at the two receivers, you go with Chase, and you may have to develop some other guys, or Joe Burrow's going to have to play better. And they've got a lot of holes to fill, and one of them is running the ball, so they let Mixon go. They're 25th in rushing, or 30th in rushing. Defensively, they're 25th in points allowed. They made the change at defensive coordinator. We'll see where that goes. But I'd say the other thing that has to happen is it has to happen early in the offseason. They've got to do whatever they're going to do and not let this linger, because what's the problem they always have? Slow starts. Slow starts. So let's get whatever they're going to do, let's have a plan, let's move forward, let's get it done, know what resources you have left, and then start the season with some certainty instead of going to camp where Jamar's sitting out and, all the stuff we've seen in the past.
All right, so a few things. One, let me say something in fairness to Joe. I think it's incredibly rare for guys to not take as much money as they can the first time they get paid. We've kind of, I'm not talking about you, just as a collective, we've recreated the history on Tom Brady, and that Tom Brady, when he got his first contract, was not yet considered a superstar player, even though he was a champion. And then the first contract he got once he was a star, he was briefly the highest paid guy in the league. It was then after that he got so many contracts that he was not, taking top of the market. People point out,
Mahomes do it?
Well, Mahomes is such a weird contract because Mahomes, everyone else was signing 4 or 5 year deals. Mahomes signed a 10-year deal that is structured in the way it's not called fully guaranteed, but it is the guarantees kick in 2 years early on a rolling basis. So he took 10 years of security over the peak of the market and still got $45 million a year.
But that's underpaid. I mean, 45 for him, that's way underpaid.
Like, I give Patrick a lot of credit because the way that he did structure his contract, he easily could have pretty much every single season say, I want to be the highest paid. But he realizes that there's a bigger picture for him. Now, he's in a different spot legacy-wise.
Right. To me, I just think, and I just try to be fair, Burrow is chasing different things than Mahomes. Mahomes was like, at that point when he signed that deal, was already a champion and was already in league MVP and was like, okay, I'm trying to be the greatest player of all time and be here forever. Joe Burrow, I feel like, is a guy who's like, man, I'm with a franchise that is shaky on spending money. I've already had my knee blown out. I'm going to sign top of the market, so I don't begrudge him that. I do not trust the Bengals at all to get this right. Not at all. Getting it right would have been signing Jamar a year ago. Like that to me was an obvious point they should have done. Oddly, if you didn't have the very special Joe Burrow-Jamar Chase relationship dating back to college, the smartest thing from franchise building is probably re-sign Chase and get a couple first-round picks for Jamar. Like, that's probably because...
You mean for Higgins? For T?
I said it wrong. No. Re-sign T and trade... If they didn't have that special relationship because he is the younger, better player who is yet to, even hit franchise tag territory, I just think if they tag and trade T. Higgins, I think they'll get 1 second-round pick. If they were to trade Jamar, I think they'd get 2 number ones.
Wow, you would trade Jamar?
I would. Because they have this special relationship, the quarterback and the wide receiver. What I'm saying is, from a franchise building perspective, I think that would be smarter.
Okay, listen. There's a lot to unpack here because we're having so many different conversations at the same time in terms of what Joe Burrow should be doing, in terms of the money. Do we trust the Bengals? What should actually be done? I guess if you technically trusted the Bengals to be able to manage the situation appropriately. This idea, though, that they should, trade Jamar Chase and get picks and this and that. Yes, if the Cincinnati Bengals were an incredibly highly run franchise, that could really turn those picks into magic? Sure. But they've never proven to be able to do that. You know, what's the really impressive move that the Cincinnati Bengals made where you were like, whoa, that was smart. That was a game changer. One that wasn't already obvious, like draft Joe Burrow, draft Jamar Chase. And they even already used an example of like, oh, they let, Mixon walk, and now their run game suffered because of it. And so you think that you should let other players walk? And yeah, you can't just use the Eagles as an example and say, oh, well, Fangio was able to turn this defense into, their bad defense into great. But again, it was a whole series of moves. It was drafting. It was already, first off, having a couple other picks in the year before, like Jalen Carter, etc. It's then drafting Cooper DeJean, Mitchell, getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson in free agency, Bond in free agency. It's a series of moves being tied together by an elite, truly special defensive coordinator who knows exactly what needs to be done and is comfortable moving a Zach Bond and saying, hey, we're going to move you over here. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So you can't. So it's not just a matter of having the right coach or just having the right guys. It's always the combination of both in terms of truly unlocking special. So you're now asking the Cincinnati Bengals to be able to do something that they've never shown their ability to do. And again, maybe some of that changes. But if you're talking about now breaking up what Joe Burrow already has going for him, unless you really have a plan with someone with a track record who's proven that he can rebuild teams and make them competitive, you're kind of backing yourself up in a corner here. It's actually why the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs in at this part of the conversation are kind of perfect examples and the 49ers to a degree, because these are 2-3 teams that have consistently shown their ability to kind of rebuild teams, to rebuild competitive, franchise, whether it be defenses, offenses, a combination, whatever it may be. That's what these franchises, and really mainly the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. And now the Rams are kind of in the process of potentially, proving their own worth at that as well. So, yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles, if A.J. Brown came here and said, I want $1 gajillion, and he's like, okay, and Howie's like, you know what, I'm going to move on from him. I'm going to trade him, and I'm now going to get like 2 first-round picks, whatever it is. Like, you would have faith. You would have faith that Howie Roseman is going to be able to now work magic with those draft picks, with that capital, and really do something with it. You would not have that same level of confidence with really like any other franchise, again, outside of the Kansas City Chiefs and maybe the 49ers, and then again, potentially the Rams. But like you're going to trust the Bills, the Ravens, the Bengals, the Giants, the Cowboys. You're just not. So just don't assume that if you let talent leave that you're going to be able to replenish it with other talent. They're yet in Joe Burrow's career here, they're yet to prove that they're capable of doing that. It was management's. The reason why they did not make the playoffs this year is 100% because of the franchise itself and management and how it's run and the decisions that they made. Like, undeniably. It wasn't necessarily coaching. It wasn't Joe Burrow. It was because of the team that they built was fundamentally inferior and inadequate. So, trust for Cincinnati to get this right? No. Do I think signing all these guys makes sense? Yes. But there still needs to be other concrete decisions that need to be made. And so then there's still the concern of like, well, will they be able to do it? Because they could go all in on defense this season, this offseason. What that exactly looks like, it depends. It depends what they're looking to get after. But the reality is that they don't need the number one defense. Yeah, obviously the better the defense, the better the team. But they just needed a competent defense. They just needed a competent defense, and they would have been a legitimate contender. I mean, that's kind of crazy when you think about it. If you look at it from the Cincinnati Bengals perspective, you're like, if we just had an average defense, we would be legitimate contenders. Because look how close we were with the worst defense. We almost beat the Ravens both times. We almost beat the Chiefs. Like you were right there in the AFC. So, it's a frustrating situation to be. But again, this idea though that you want to break up, or you're like, oh well, Joe Burrow needs to be better. He should only need one wide receiver, and it's like, again, that's what I keep saying. So you want to give him no O-line, no run game, only one wide receiver and a bad defense, and expect him to be able to win. It's just, you want to talk about revisionist history with Tom Brady. It's revisionist history of what we talk about with any of these other quarterbacks. It's just absurd. Right, Lamar Jackson didn't have a ton of offensive weapons earlier on in his career, but he had great defenses. Patrick Mahomes started his career with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, two all-pro, elite, all-time great offensive weapons combined with Andy Reid. Then when you moved on from Tyreek Hill, you then still transitioned into a significantly better defense, not to mention these last 2 years, an elite defense, and then drafted people like a Rashee Rice, had Pacheco. Like you then put together other pieces that were special, not to mention you have someone like a Travis Kelce who's better than like 95% of the number one wide receivers. Not to mention in the playoffs, literally becomes an all-time great playoff performer. So yeah, you can overcome any of those perceived deficits. But this idea that someone like a Patrick Mahomes just had Travis Kelce, then a bunch of average guys on offense and defense with like a pretty good coach. Come on. It's absurd. It's absurd. And Andy Reid and Spags and company, they're always great that in the playoffs, they have their teams get better. That wide receiver 2, 3, etc. somehow is a little bit more wide open. The defense is a little bit more simplified and elevated. So I just don't understand what we constantly expect someone like a Joe Burrow to be able to do. I really don't. If they had an amazing O-line, a really good defense, I could understand the whole Jamar Chase move, right? If you had enough positives going in your direction, or if you had an awesome GM who is going to hit and make some really awesome moves, then sure. But I just don't have that faith. And yet you're going to then try to break up the one thing that you actually know works. You're going to break up the one thing that you know actually works for this team in hopes of trying to build something that will then be better than what it is right now. That's a tough one to sell. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Cincinnati Bengals? Do you trust that they'll get this right? What do you think that they should actually do? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.